A very good morning to you. You're welcome to Just Africa. We are reaching you live from our studios at Sook News Television. I am Oyinpreye Krumale. The recent decision by Nigerian banks to restart international transactions using Naira-denominated debit card marks a pivotal moment in the country's financial recovery after a 3-year suspension driven by a crippling dollar shortage. This move reflects renewed confidence in Nigeria's foreign exchange regime and signals a fresh prospect for businesses and individuals reliant on global remittances, travel, and e-commerce. The stabilization of the Naira hovering around 1,528 Naira or 1,529 Naira to the dollar in the official market underscores the effectiveness of recent foreign exchange reforms and growing forex liquidity. Good morning to you once again and welcome to Just Africa. I am Oyinpreye Krumale. Olumide, good morning.
Good morning, Priya. How are you doing?
I'm okay. Did this get to you by way of surprise?
Well, it's a long time coming. I think it had to do with the Naira instability and all that. But now that every other thing has been put in place, I see a good move. It would aid education, it will aid trade, it will also aid travel-related expenses, especially for Nigerians paying for school fees abroad and all that. I remember also when I traveled to Ghana some while back, I think about 3 or 4 years back.
Yes.
I was only entitled to $50.
$50?
Yeah, from my ATM card, my international ATM card. It was just $50.
$50?
Yes, $50.
Wow.
And it was quite... So I had to, engage with a Malam and some other people.
You went to the...
trying to exchange money and, so it wasn't easy because from my hotel to where I would do that, it was quite a journey and all that. So I see this as a welcome idea. I heard that it's the limit monthly spending limits ranging from $500 to $10,000. I think that's a very good move.
Oh, 10,000. We got to 10,000.
Depending on the bank.
Depending on the bank.
Yes, depending on the
so
bank.
the limit of spending varies among banks.
Yes.
Now let's move on without much further ado. The first, liquidity and institutional resilience. Now, the reforms introduced in June 2023, including currency flotation and unified forex windows, have steadily boosted dollar inflows. Major banks like GT Bank now permit $1,000 per quarter on Naira cards, while others offer $500 monthly, indicating restored trust in the banking systems and exchange rate stability and the macroeconomic health. The Naira stability of 1,529 Naira as official to 1,559 Naira, the parallel market, shows consistency across the forex segments, and official reserves have risen to $37 billion, bolstered by high-yield debt offerings and disciplined monetary policy. We got that from Business Day, who was given that implication. So in business confidence, despite ongoing inflation, the GDP grew by 4.6% in the fourth quarter of 2024, with continued 2025 expansion expected. Multilateral data suggests a more unified and transparent forex market supports. This trajectory is seen to be bolstered by other indications. Now, the implications for trade, investment, and digital payment, restoring international card usage, seems as a catalyst to e-commerce, travel, and digital services. It enhances global market integration and offers remittances and recipients, giving greater convenience to the impending Afrigo Pay launch, and further shows Nigeria's push toward data sovereignty and reduce forex defenses and dependencies. We're going to break. When we return, we have our guest join us on the platform. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. It's Just Africa. Do stay with us. A very good morning to you once again and welcome to the program. We have a guest joining us on the program to discuss what we are talking about today. His name is Michaels Ashibogwu, PhD, FNIPR. is the Chief Executive Officer of Billsbox Services Limited and a distinguished professional with extensive expertise spanning training in financial technology, advertising, and public relations. Renowned for his strategic insight, Dr. Ashibogwu has demonstrated a deep commitment to advancing the integration of artificial intelligence and digital media within the contemporary communications practices. Of course, his biography is longer than that. We had to cut it short because if we continue, we might take the whole time into the program. Good morning to you once again.
Good morning.
Dr. Monday Michaels. That's MMA. Monday Michaels Ashibogwu. Welcome to Just Africa.
Thank you.
Yes. Nigerian banks, we have renewed or we have recommenced this process. So the thing is, what's this process all about? Because some of our viewers may not know, and what led to the suspension in the first place, and why we're coming there. Those look like three questions in a whole lump sum. Let's start. What's this whole thing? What is it about?
Okay, what it means is that Nigerians who do not need to source for dollars or pounds or euros and pay into their domiciliary accounts and then obtain cards in those currencies denominations to perform international transactions or transactions in such currencies, either online on the web or at points of sales terminals or while outside the country. So what it means, you can travel with a Naira denominated card to any place that will charge you at a foreign currency, be it USD, Great Britain pounds, euro, CFA, name it, and you will get value. But it is capped at a particular value of the maximum of $1,000. This is just one opener by the Central Bank of Nigeria to enable Nigerians also have some form of assurance that their currency has maintained some sense of stability, and meaning that our reserves also have shored up to meet up this kind of demand when it comes to consumptions using cards that are denominated in the Naira. So when you find such happening, it also throws light on the confidence of your country's currency to play in the global market space. Before now, it means that you have isolated your currency from playing within the market space. And once that happens, countries also will reciprocate in the same manner. Once your cards cannot perform such transactions, it means your terminals here, like your ATM and point of sales terminals, will not be willing to accept international cards at their own denomination, except those cards are switched on international currencies.
Okay.
So what it means is that if I have a POS, for example, that is a Nigerian POS, say, for example, be it PalmPay, Money Point, or whatever, I can come in with a US card to make a withdrawal for the value of the Naira and get cash. I can walk into an ATM machine and do that same transaction and get value in cash. That reciprocity was clearly absent because you could only look for maybe perhaps a point of sales terminal or ATM terminal that will give you value for the same currency to which you have.
Yes.
And this comes at a very high cost. If you look at the percentages of such card transactions, it's quite heavy. Now, what it does is that you will be dealing with exchange for the value of your currency, and the timeline for also settlement also is longer because that country's financial institution will have to deal with your country's clearing bank in their own country. But in this situation where this switching is done, the card owners do the settlements in most cases. So if you're using a MasterCard, you're using a Visa card and other international cards that are in Nigeria and denominated in Naira, it gives the user a clear advantage because the settling is done strictly on the, by the issuers. Okay. And so for the financial institutions who give out those cards, it's also a seamless transaction for them because these banks have correspondent banks and they get instant value. And what it means is that if a Nigerian card, say you perform a $500 transaction, that value is taken from the correspondent bank's position, and also they can also take value from if they are a correspondent bank's position for that other bank in Nigeria.
Okay, so I want to, was this the status quo? Because we heard that it was actually suspended for a while. Was this the status quo?
No, it was suspended for 3 years, but it didn't start today. I think the first, within in the last 20 years, we had the first, we've been regulating these processes because of several factors. In 2013, we cut down the ability to use the Naira denominated card from $500,000 to $150,000. And then it moved to $50,000. And then we found ourselves at a particular time at $5,000 until 2023, right? 3 years ago, we found ourselves at a dilemma, and there was this, it was like a hawk attack on the Naira. You know, practically everybody decided that the Naira should be feasted upon. Now what happens, and which is the principal responsibility of the Apex Bank, that's the central bank, is to protect the country's currency by the instruments of policies, be it physical or monetary. What they do is that they issue these policies to safeguard and protect the stability of a currency. Now, countries could allow such exchanges, but the thing is that over time, we found out that there was this consistent abuse of users of the Naira denominated cards for round tripping. Round tripping is a situation where you have individuals who spool out foreign exchange, right? Take it out, then bring it back to Nigeria and sell it in the parallel market at a higher margin. So you could find, you would have seen some news headlines where some persons were apprehended with 60, 70, 80 ATM cards, not belonging to such persons at the airport in transit either to Dubai or to some other countries where it is flexible to use those transactions and obtain foreign currencies, then bring it back to the country, sell it at the parallel market. It was a disservice to the Naira, and that would also help in the depreciation of the value of that currency. It will also put pressure on your foreign exchange reserve. So, and then there was also demand for some obnoxious kinds of products that could be locally produced. And that was why the central bank, in its own wisdom, decided to create a list of prohibited items where you couldn't use their directly sourced foreign exchange by the government to make such procurement. So you had to go to the alternative markets to do that. But be it as it may, it's a good, that would also help individuals. It's not actually in the interest of corporates or companies. It will help MSMEs because we have a larger chunk of transactions happening in Nigeria within the informal sector. And that's why you see the tax reforms would also be, you see with the tax reforms and this policy, it's an enabler to ensure that global trade, even within the informal sector, can be captured within a basket where people can also, the government can also show up revenue.
All right, thank you very much for your point. Now, so I'm also looking at the limitations of this international Naira card. Pegged at 1,000 Naira. This might $1,000. I beg your pardon. This might hinder trade. It might also hinder travel expenses, especially for Nigerian students, you know, to pay their school fees. Also, who qualify? Looking at the informal sector, would this they might not necessarily qualify for these cards because we all know to open a domiciliary account, there are certain requirements. You might need 1 or 2 guarantors operating a current account and some other things. So if it's actually focused to enable or boost SMEs, how would they bridge the gap in terms of...
The limitations ought to be there. That's the truth. You must cap. You must cap transactions. That's the truth. So you do not have, let me call it a senseless way of doing things and people taking things for granted. I told you that in 2013, the central bank also capped from 500,000 to 150,000 and went down to 50,000 because we found out that a lot of persons were running individual transactions for something that ought to be corporate. For example, you open letters of credits. You open documents like Form A for remittances if you want to make payments of fees. So we will know to where this fund is going to. If it's going to an institution in the UK, to America, to Canada, to Australia, be it wherever it's going to, when these documents are opened, there are legitimate channels of transferring the money. The Central Bank of Nigeria owes the obligation of making sure the financial institutions have access to such funds at the appropriate exchange rates. What happens is that a lot of persons take these cards. As I said, I've given this example. So when you cap is for, let's say, some very short form of transactions that you do not need to go through this process of opening a Form A or a Form C, as the case may be, or letters of credit or whatever, to make such remittances. School fees come with a minimum of £4,000, £5,000. If you're going to the UK, the minimum deposit for graduate studies is £5,000. You are not expecting a person with a card now to make that, no. What it does is that it enables financial institutions look at the flow. So you put the value of the money in Naira in your account, open up your Form A, and the bank will switch the money to the school, and they will receive it, and it will be a confirmation you have your receipt. But yes, there are some transactions. For example, you run a website or you run a blog, and your blog is hosted somewhere, and your monthly subscription is, say, $150. You need to pay for antivirus, $50. You need to pay for this, $35. Yes, that is where the card can come to play, right? You are at the airport, you need to go to a duty-free shop to buy some perfumes and some other things, and you could make an expense of like $400 or $500. This would help. But the thing is that for a system that is largely dependent on consumption and the real industry is still challenged, you should cap. But for a system that has the manufacturing concerns working optimally, and you have different industries working in such a way that they are also export focused, you don't need to cap any card, because those export proceeds that will be coming into the country is sufficient enough to back up any kind of transactions you want to do. And then it will also defeat the purpose of the parallel market, because already those manufacturing concerns are mopping up more cash in terms of export proceeds into the system in terms of foreign exchange. So apart from receipts from government transactions in oil and gas and other, let's say, raw materials and extractive products like gold and other mine products or raw materials exported that comes in as a receipt through maybe NNPC and other government-held business concerns into the central bank and to the reserve accounts, you have export proceeds coming from manufacturing concerns. That gives you a huge leverage. Right now, that is not the situation. Our receipts for foreign exchange is largely dependent on crude. So, and now we are beginning to get some form of reprieve from the services sector. For example, our creative content sector is mopping up cash. People, you know how much people are mopping in from TikTok. People are mopping in money from creating content. People are mopping in money also from the entertainment industry. People are mopping in money from also technology today. So, yes, we're beginning to have some form of reprieve. And that is based on that decision. Any forward-thinking regulatory body will say, okay, fine, let's give this leeway, because these guys who are doing this business, for example, a TikToker needs to pay for a camera $15, $45, $250. But when you go into something above $1,000, you open up a document. The central bank has not denied many persons any form of forex. And mind you also, the central bank gave the opportunity for you to approach Bureau de Change, which is the alternative market, to source for that same foreign exchange. If you so desire that is something of importance to you and you cannot get such funds at the exchange rate that the central bank is offering. So it's a because we operate an open market with some form of regulation. So the Nigerian market is an open economy. It's not a closed economy. It's not Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union.
Excellent.
Neither is it China.
Okay. So thank you very much for that explicit explanation. Now, during Lamido Sanusi's, I think then that was during the Buhari's administration when the Naira was really suffering. And I think probably after then, after the 2023 elections, or before, or towards the 2023 elections, politicians were accused of trying to buy the votes of delegates during the primary elections, by paying as high as $10,000, $15,000, and this came in cash. So it looks like the dollar, physical cash dollar in the economy, were being mopped up by the politicians and hoarded for that purpose.
True to that.
Very good. Now, Lamido Sanusi made a statement that, look, we cannot continue to do this because some people will come under the name of a company and they want to buy dollars, and the CBN will bring down, if the dollar was like 150 Naira, they are going to access it for 135 Naira. Then they just mop us as much as 10 million or 10 billion Naira worth of dollar equivalent, then they go keep it somewhere without effective scrutiny. Do you think we are still operating in that space? Or things like that still happen, that it used to happen then, that has a very, very, a very high level of consequence upon the Naira?
You know, in every society you have the good, the bad, and the ugly. They will always be there. In every sphere, be it economy, social life, lifestyle, entertainment, even in the religious environment, you have the good, the bad, and the ugly. They'll always be there. The question is, how impactful is your regulation to put in check the behavior of the good, the bad, and also the ugly? Now, that has always been the situation. And sometimes policy making comes two ways. It's either proactive or reactionary. Now, and let me also correct the impression. Lamido Sanusi's administration was in the Jonathan Goodluck's time, and Emefiele came in afterwards. We've had this drama from Lamido Sanusi up to Emefiele. It was Emefiele who actually took the bold step into creating the prohibitive list and a whole lot of other. But the Naira had always come under attack since 1982. It is the strongest currency in sub-Saharan Africa. It is also a currency of interest because Nigerians by nature are migratory, very transient people, move a lot, and when they move with volumes of commercial activities. Quite unlike other persons who are moving either as a result of displacement from crisis or refugees. Nigerians move and create business opportunities. And so when they move, their movements are largely transactional. And when it happens, the Naira also moves with Nigerians. And then the sub-Saharan Africans, having observed this, that the Naira earns a global respect, would also come in with their own currency, shore up the Naira for an exchange for Forex. So what you have, for example, if you go to Seme, you see Nigerians, you see other foreign nationals who are trading with the CFA and the Naira. And what they do is when the Naira is at an advantage with the dollar, they will mop up their CFA, obtain the Naira, and obtain dollars. It is a global behavior everywhere. People trade in foreign currency. There's also the digital Forex market. So the Naira had come under pressure since 1982. If you recall, the first coming of Buhari, we had the counter-trade market. You had the first tier foreign exchange market. We had the second tier foreign exchange market under IBB. We had under the structural adjustment program, we had different rates. Then we had a unified rate. And then we also come, this has been historical from 82, right? Where it was obvious that the country didn't have enough to just wish away to people. But people, either in government, maybe by default, or people in private sector by default, assume that our resources will never finish, or the resources will remain relevant. And I keep telling people something. There was a stone age, and today it may be the tech age. But at the time the stone age was, stone was the most valuable thing that people could buy, right? Today, tech is ruling the world. Oil has moved, right? The black gold is moving away, and the world is moving towards tech. Oil has not gone away. Stone has not gone away. So what you have today that makes you a global power, tomorrow could be obsolete. And so for forward-thinking people, the Naira will continue to fall under pressure because the entire sub-Saharan Africa watches the Naira.
Okay. Now, okay, let's Olumide.
All right. So my first question is, how sustainable is the current FX stability, and what factors could derail it again? Secondly, what protections can be put in place or have been put in place to make sure that we do not go into a relapse of dollar scarcity?
Well, you know, the shenanigans won't go away so quickly. There are some persons who are excited by this, and for every good reason. And there are some persons who are excited for it for every wrong reason. While you will carry on with your legitimate business, you pay for your website, you pay for your services, you obtain something from a global site and pay in foreign exchange, and it goes seamlessly. There are some persons who are looking at how they can maximize profit from trading in foreign currency. So these are the people that are of concern to us. And that's why you see a situation where at the time government started going after persons with multiple ATM cards, and the intention was that they were round tripping. Now, some of them also obtained Nigerian machines, took them to as far as Dubai. Yes. So I think we learned our lessons. And I'm sure that for the 3 years that this suspension was on and there was some form of stability to our foreign reserves, the Central Bank of Nigeria would have taken all these things into consideration before saying, okay, let's go at 1,000, capped at $1,000 per quarter. And the reason behind this is because the informal sector is a key driver. Services sector is also going to impact on the GDP that you've heard. So by the time we have quarter 1, quarter 2, 2025 results, possibly in December, you would begin to see the significant impact of what these may have done. Now, there are what we call extraneous factors. You don't prepare for them, right? How would, for example, US react? Because just yesterday, the United States cut down our 5-year visa plan in reciprocity to Nigeria, because Nigeria do not give 5 years visa plan, to 3 months. What it means is that Nigerians will need to pay more every 3 months to obtain visas. So if that happens, will that impact on the currency? There are also policies of other countries that may be taken that may be inimical to this. If the global conflict, say in Ukraine and Russia, Iran and Israel, further escalates, and there is a scarcity for the supply of crude, and Nigeria has large receipts to meet with the global market, then fine, it becomes advantageous. But, you know, one of the reprieve that you're having today is because the emergence of the Dangote refinery brought about some form of succor by the conservation of forex that ordinarily would have been used for procurement of finished products.
Great.
And also for the while that the Port Harcourt refinery worked, producing even below capacity, it also impacted on the local supply to the market. Now, these are determinants that helps show up foreign exchange. So the pressure hitherto may have been that the demand may be for say, $50 billion, and your reserve is about $30 billion. Right now, perhaps we've shored up so much that even the manufacturing concerns and importers, whatever they put out with their letters of credit or demand for forex, the central bank can conveniently meet. And once they say, okay, we can do that, then we move to the individuals and say, okay, you can access $1,000. Why not?
Okay.
And we'll look at also the percentage of Nigerians who have had dollar-denominated cards, and against percentage of Nigerians who have had Naira-denominated cards, and what has been the transactions on even the dollar-denominated cards before now. So if we say, for example, 65,000 Nigerians have been using dollar-denominated card, what it means is that you are going to have an influx of those 65,000 Nigerians moving to the Naira-denominated card, because it's a lot easier. They don't need to go to an aboki or to a bureau d'exchange to obtain forex at an exorbitant rate.
Great.
Now, the second part of it is that there will be new entrants to the market. That is where we would look at some other reasons if there will be shocks for it. I'm sure the CBN believes there's a capacity to meet up with the demand, and that's why they capped it at $1,000.
Okay.
2 banks have taken the initiative,
Yeah.
kicked off, UBA and Guaranteed Trust Bank. We're hoping that other banks will follow in the weeks coming.
All right.
And with that, you would see some resemblance of reprieve for smaller businesses that need to do basic transactions below $500.
Great. Now, we are due for a break, but before we go, I need you to attend to this. The Burna Boys of Nigeria, the Davidos, the Wizkids, and Nigerian athletes and musicians, they travel abroad and they go perform in places like the O2 Arena and in big concert venues abroad, and they are paid lots of thousands of pounds, of dollars. When you were talking about some of those activities or transactions that takes place in the country that seem to, bring in hard foreign currency into the country and that will actually, breathe out the pressure of the foreign exchange on the Naira, we don't seem, these monies, they are a large amount of money. Does that mean if we have lots of that and they are really brought into the economy, are they going to help shore up the Naira and devalue the dollar? Or what are the implications, advantages and disadvantages of that?
Yeah. We could run the China model, leave the Naira on a free fall, and see shore up the currency so that you can enable investors to come into the system because the money is cheaper and then they can build up more manufacturing consign. Or you can continue to show up and your currency remains strong, but something can happen to that sector.
What do you mean by running the China model?
Well, China continues to devalue its currency. And it continues to do that deliberately to encourage investors into their system.
To bring in their hard dollars.
Yes. So when you bring in the funds, they have manufacturing consigns. Practically everything that the world is using today is dependent on China. From shoes, shirts, fabrics, name it.
Inflation.
No, it doesn't. It will only impact inflation if your country do not manage its resources properly. Or perhaps you are heavy thrift spenders. If your country is dependent largely on consumption without having manufacturing consigns, without having, production consigns, then what is happening to us today, double digits,
yes,
interest rates high, you are paying close to 50 to 60% on microfinancing and financing outside established banking institutions that are even charging as much as 27 to 30%. That would only come down where there is reprieve, that funds that will come in will stay long. Reasons why the interest rates are higher and inflation will go up is because such funds come at a short term.
Okay, such funds come at a short term. We'll go on a break. We're still having a conversation with Dr. Monday Michaels Ashibogwu, right? Ashibogwu, right. We're going to break. We're back in a moment. Just stay with us. Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us on the program. It is sounding like a conversation that will never come to an end, even though we need to end. But we're not drawing the curtain immediately. It looks like we're going to be having Dr. Monday Michaels again on the program because I think we've not actually exhausted him because he has so much to give. Welcome once again to the program.
Thank you.
How? Because there are some instances, there are some international schools in Nigeria, in highbrow areas, the Lagos Island, the Kois and the Lekkis, and the words of those children don't pay in Naira to those schools.
But that's illegal.
That's illegal, yes. And there's a time that even the National Assembly have to start to give warnings but the thing is, even some of them could be said that they are the ones that own those schools. Some of the people who own those schools would have passed through that institutions too. So it doesn't look like it has abated, but it's still there. Does that work for or against our economy?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. If you collect the foreign exchange and you're leaving it here, it's fine. But by the time you start to repatriate the funds, then we have a problem. Because you're depleting from somewhere, you're taking from somewhere. There are even apartments within the highbrow areas of Lagos Island, Ikoyi, Banana Island that were being given out in foreign exchange. Some people are paying in foreign exchange. It's just that it's not an official thing, but it's illegal by law. But how far will you regulate everybody? People will tell you it's either you do this or forget about it. And you're not the owner of the property to now start saying, okay, I would tell you how to do your business. So, and some of them are doing that also to hold positions when the market fluctuates. I will give an example of a telecoms company that suffered this metamorphosis of what foreign exchange risk can do. When they started as Etisalat, and the parent company was Mubadala. And at the time they took the loans to upgrade their facility, the dollar was 144 Naira. That was 2013. And by the time it was time to make the first payment, the dollar had gotten to 438 Naira.
No.
In 2016. How do you expect a brand like that to survive? So their being alive today as Nine Mobile speaks a lot of how resilient Nigerian businesses have gone through experiencing the foreign exchange risk. So when people say that you should pay them in foreign exchange, there's a reason for it, because they're looking at the risk involved in the foreign exchange market. If I started the business at 44 Naira a dollar as a news site. We started our news site at 44 Naira per dollar in 2004. Today, I'm paying 1,500 for subscription of a server that we're paying $1,500 a month. And then you want to up the advertising rate. And you are telling someone now to pay you in dollars, because if you put the rate at, say, 10 million Naira, next month, your 10 million Naira may not be able to give you $1,500, for example. So that's the reality on the ground.
What are the possible ways that we can avert this as a nation?
Open your markets to manufacturing, getting more investors, FDI, foreign direct investments. When you have more foreign direct investments in the real sector, not portfolio investors, not those guys who just come and sit in your stock exchange, and the moment a price of stock mark up, they clean out, put out their suitcases, and they're out of your country. If you recall, we had that experience too in the Nigerian capital market. So the thing is, the regulator has been forward-thinking, but you know, the shenanigans of some persons, they can be smarter than you think. No matter how smart a country is, there are people who always know how to beat the system. You can recall right now, as we're speaking, the US is still prosecuting persons of taking millions of dollars from the COVID fund. So it's not as if it's something that is just particular to Nigeria. But what we're looking at is the consistency and the ability of the regulator to be forward-thinking, because the regulator works both precautionary and reactively. So they've taken precautions by implementing this policy. We hope it works. But when issues start to come, they will also react.
All right, thank you very much. Talking about opening a market for manufacturers or investors, do you think that the current monetary policy environment, is it friendly enough to attract long-term capital inflows?
In terms of documentation, it's very friendly, but I don't know about practice. We have every document that would encourage any investor to come to Nigeria. But when you get to the airport, I do not know, from the customs to the immigration to the Ministry of Trade and Investment and all that. That's where the story starts. There's always a human element to policy. So imagine that I come in and I say I'm bringing in $20 million or $20 billion to Nigeria. I get in here. Somebody gives me 3 weeks to get a document I could have gotten in an hour.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So these are factors. So in terms of documentation, we have one of the perfect FDI documents you can find in the world. Akinwumi did experiment with that when he was Nigeria's Minister
of Agriculture.
Yes, we did a lot here in Nigeria. We have had ministers who have brought in, and followed it to the latter. Nigeria's current Minister of Aviation is trying everything possible to make sure that aviation companies come and set up dry hangars in this place. So C checks, B checks, and A checks can be done in Nigeria rather than flying those aircrafts out and keeping them for months and weeks. He's also been able to remove those litigation gaps where some persons act smart by half. Anytime they are owing and they cannot meet up their obligation for wet lease, they approach the courts, get some form of injunction over and over again to prevent the owners of the aircraft from getting their aircraft. And so he's done that. So those who are notorious for owing and do not like to keep to contract, he's forcing them to do that. That's why I'm saying that in terms of policy documents, we are perfect as a country. We have the best laws. Issue is the human factor. You could find yourself frustrated out of the system if you are actually falling into the wrong hands.
Great. Now, there is one thing that is very important. Akinwumi Adesina, that we just referenced, one of the global economic summits, actually said that if 1.4 billion Africans trade together, we will make more progress than we are making. And recently, there's been a conversation about we do not need to, if I'm going to trade in Ghana, if I'm going to Ghana, I don't need to change my Naira to dollar first, then change it, then access it to CD before doing that. Do you think we can get through those routes, or
we've done it? It's working now.
Do you think we should? Yes, it's working. Do you think we should head towards? We should still consolidate it by making sure that we have one currency, either in West Africa or in the whole of Africa, that can facilitate that and still maintain our own individual currency?
I think what we're dealing with, fundamentally, one is trust issues. Two, the ability of those institutions to maintain these things sustainably. I remember the Pan-African Payment System, PAPS, right? It's effective. Today, with your MoMo, MTN MoMo PSB, Payment Service Bank, you can send money to someone in Ghana. You can send money to someone in Liberia, send money to someone in Cameroon. Just go there, look out for the person's details, send the value in Naira to the person in Ghana. He will get the value in cedis. But meanwhile, in the same country that you're talking about in Ghana, you cannot do interbank transfers.
There is no interbank transfers.
Good. So, Nigeria, that's why I say our technology is quite robust. It's quite robust. You can't transfer, for example, from a First Bank to a UBA in Ghana. It has to be a UBA to UBA. So that's why people likely depend on MoMo. You can't find POS terminals on the streets like as you find in Nigeria.
Okay, so is that a problem of the conventional banks, or is that
it's technology. Ability to acquire such technology, it comes at an enormous cost. It comes at an enormous cost.
But the fintechs are also.
So we have the Nigerian interbank settlement system.
Yes.
We've even allowed another payment aggregator right now, Unified Payment. Some countries don't have payment aggregators. So their settlement is with their central banks, and it has to go through clearing. So even in the United States, you don't get instant value. It's only in the UK and Nigeria you get instant value. You transfer money to somebody, gets instant value now.
From different financial institutions.
Good. So it comes at an enormous cost.
So who are we giving plaudits to in this case?
You give credit to our Nigerian financial services system.
Okay.
Also the regulator for also having the foresight to allow it to happen. Right? You go to some countries, despite their sophistication, you can't even access a doctor within an hour. Here, a slight headache, you are seeing a doctor, either private or public. So what we're saying is that when you look at sophistication of cross-border, one, trust. Some countries prefer that they would rather send their money to France and get euro than do an exchange with Nigeria to get their own currency. So there's also a mentality of leadership.
Okay.
Somebody will say, okay, I would rather you pay me in dollars. I've had to commune with somebody, it's a staff of ours, he was in Malawi. So we send money to him, he wants the money in dollars. He doesn't want the salary in his Malawian currency. So if, as a citizen, he has that perception, we don't know the percentage, and also that percentage in governance. So PAPS has come to stay. Now, you must thank Dr. Rama for that, because when the Afro-Exim Bank put up about $50 billion to help in the exchange of cross-border African countries, all we need to do is to consolidate that by even the establishment of an African central bank.
Okay.
Right? Where countries' currencies are traded at a unified exchange rate that it also can challenge the dollar. So if you're taking the rand to Nigeria, the value of the rand to Nigerian Naira would also give you the same value of the rand and the Naira to the dollar.
Okay.
So if you say a dollar, for example, is 1,500, and maybe that is equal to 20 rand, for example, it should also be equal to $1. So that dynamics is, I think, we're fine-tuning. Over time, African leaders also, some African leaders, I'm sorry to say, they are even worse than even infants. So you need to spoon-feed them. And some African leaders are forward-thinking. Some are interested in power grab. That's all they're interested in. If you've gone to some African countries, you will weep for why Africans actually migrate. So the truth is, the entire West African sub-region, the Naira is the currency to fear.
Okay, rounding up. All right, so I like the fact that you brought up about this PAPS card. So I would like to ask you, in long-term, talking about long-term investment into African trade and all that, the PAPS card and the international Naira card, which do you think?
Have you seen the Afrigo Nigerian card? It's stronger than what even you're talking about the PAPS card.
Which do you think Africans should really embrace more?
You see, it's all about country policies and the ability to ratify these treaties, right? Nigeria is a forward-thinking global market. There's a lot of interest, both for import and export. Whatever you bring into this country, there are people ready and willing and able to consume it, and they have the purchasing power. That's the interesting dynamics of the Nigerian market, with over 200 million people. Some markets have this same population and do not have the purchasing power. So when you talk about having a global card or a continental card, you should also look at the peculiarities of such countries, the capacities to purchase. Some of them are dependent on our country for electricity. Some of them are dependent on our country for the provision of gas. Those ones who were calling us a generator country, we give them gas for their 24 hours electricity. When the power went off in Ghana, it was published that this is as a result of shortage of gas from Nigeria. So some of them you see bragging about the infrastructure. That's why I said there's a pressure on the Naira politically, socially, and on the economic side. So the question is, now you have introduced this policy, what will be the reaction of the international community? That's something you cannot factor. Some countries can decide to deliberately switch off your card for being accepted. You get to the airport, you can't use the card, despite the fact that, yes, you can use that for dollar procurement.
I told you when we got back from the break that it's a conversation that is inexhaustible, and Dr. Monday Michaels has done justice to that. But the thing is, if it doesn't, it's going to come back, hopefully. If it doesn't, trust me, we will go to him. This is where we draw the curtain on Just Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Monday Michaels, for your time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite a robust conversation we had this morning. And I'm sure our viewers are, reeling on their chairs from the wealth of knowledge you've poured out this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is where we sign out on the program here, Olumide.
All right, it's been a pleasure. I think this has been a robust conversation. It's an eye-opener for me, and it's a way forward for Nigerians and Africans to really understand how we can, best protect our currency.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, from the Just African crew, we say thank you for watching. Many thanks for joining us.